to Jim on a township, Tommy's in shop new a country Tim Branigan. Hello, good afternoon. Frank Quinn here from the 1916 Societies. We'll be doing an interview with ex-P.o.W, current Republican activist and author, Mr. Tim Branigan from West Belfast.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invite, both.
Absolutely. We're here today to cover several issues, including racism, the rise of the right, and the current racist riots in Ballymena, Riots, and throughout the north of Ireland. But that is coming from the 1916 Societies here in County Tyrone. Okay, we'll get into the interview. Tim, how are you keeping? Can you give us a bit of your own background as an individual and your activism over the last 25 to 30 years or further back even?
First of all, thanks for inviting me down, Frankie. Been a while since I've seen you. We first met in Crumlin Road Prison in 1990, Seawin, and spent time in the Crum and then up in the H blocks, and when we were both much younger and less worried. And I am from West Belfast, and for the benefit of people listening, I happen to be black man, and when I grew up in West Belfast with a white family and a white mum and stuff, and I was born in 1966, so from when I was about 3-4, my life ran parallel with the troubles and the conflict, and I was, I guess, the only black guy in the village when I was a kid, and it led to some, I'll just give you an example of what that was like, right? So we're a big Republican family, and Mum was a real stauncher like, for the struggle and all of that, and I guess our home was an IRA safe house, and well, when I was out in the street and stuff, when the Brits came in for patrols and stuff, I became the target, even though I was only a child, because I was the odd one out, so the Brits would go, don't know if I'm allowed to use the N-word here, right, but they go, oh, look at that wee nigger, and go back to the jungle and share all this abuse at me, right, and around us, you know, the people would be shouting back and going back to London and go back to England and all these blimey bastards and all this type of stuff, right, so I'm trying to make sense of this at 5, 6, 7 years old, and what I realised was, I was always aware I was different, but what I realised was when the Brits gave me abuse, what it actually did was drive me into the arms of the local community, and I realised, you know, women coming out of the front step and all, and saying, leave that wee boy alone, he's a great wee lad, and why are you picking on him and all this, you know? And the only time it come back to this, but it became complex when sometimes the British Army would come into the street, and it'd be, my heart would sink if I saw a black soldier among them. And so the same shouting match would go on again, and the Brits would go, you know, they would point to the black soldier and say, hey Joe, is that your wee brother there? Are you his dad? And all of this type of stuff, you know. And the locals would, again, my friends and their parents and older boys and all on the street would be shouting back and leave him alone, and but then some of them would go, well, and the point of the black soldier go, well, he's a fucking nigger too, you know? And then they turned to me and said, no offence, Tim. And I'm standing there trying to make sense of these, you know, and I would always be, I always just felt awkward, and, you know, when I was primary school kid, you know, I wasn't able to articulate my feelings and all of that, you know? But it made me realise, oh, I've got my own struggle here, you know, we're all getting oppressed as nationalists, then within that, you know, I've got this other layer, and it was a layer, you know, I'm looking at my own skin here, but it's very visible, you know, I can't hide it, you know, it's not like Frankie, we were talking earlier about the Lithuanians and Polish people here in this Tyrone area, but I always looked at them and thought, well, until they open their mouths, people don't know who the fuck they are, or, you know, what their background is and stuff, whereas with myself, it's very obvious. But so I grew up with that sort of running conflict with the Brits, where I was always the other one out, an easy target, and with the RUC as well, in particular the RUC, and so I was often singled out, and it was tricky, like, you know, but I always felt I'm a Republican up there, and that gave me, you know, points for that. I remember reading Republican news, you know, at Christmas, all the names of all the volunteers and stuff like that, or the road of honour and stuff, you know, and so I was a right wing stauncher.
So Cam, would you say that the Republican movement embraced you as an individual, irrespective of the colour of your skin in West Belfast?
Oh yeah, definitely, and I would have said it was probably a bit of a novelty, and nearly at times I guess people felt quite proud to look at us in our, you know, I know it wasn't a word at the time, but look at us in our diversity and stuff, you know, we've a black activist in our ranks and stuff like that, you know, and so yeah, to a large extent I definitely felt part of the movement, and, you know, some people at Gary Adams and all would have known who I was, and he said hello Tim, you know, in the street, and you just felt part of it all, like, and I suppose in terms of activism, then it would have been the hunger strikes, as it was for a lot of people, but I was 14, 15 when they took place, so then it became, and because it was such an intense period, then they had lots to do, you know, putting up flags and banners and murals and all of that, and attending the rallies and stuff. And yeah, I would have been well known as a Republican in the Mid-Falls area then. I was selling Republican news door to door, and, you know, for the best part of a decade, I think.
Yeah.
And as I say, I would have got attention from the cops and the Brits, and that did me no harm in terms of how I was perceived by people then. People thought, you know, this wee guy is getting a lot of crap, you know, and but also he's committed and he's one of us, and so yeah, 95% of it would have been extremely positive and all. Now, West Belfast is a working class area, and we didn't all use the language that we have now around diversity and around inclusion and things like that, you know, so it would have been, for all of us, for Catholics, Protestants, Republicans, whatever, life was much harder, it was much more on the edge, and I suppose sometimes in the broader Republican movement and the West Belfast, you know, some people might have made the odd joke or something like that, stereotypes, or even that they thought they were making a joke that was in some way a positive joke. So they would say, "Oh, free Nelson Mandela," things like that, you know. And it took a while to work out, you know, how do I feel about that? But for the most part, I'd say I'd be much more comfortable in my skin now as a black person than I was back then, you know. And so you know, but like everyone, you know, you read, you live, and you interact with people, and so. But when I was 15, 16, I just want to fit in. I don't want to be the odd guy out and stuff like that, you know.
Just specifically during the hunger strike time, where it became the hunger strike made the struggle far more international as well. And you had the Mandelas, you had the P.o.W, you had all the other struggles in Nicaragua and all the other struggles that were identifying with our struggle. Nicaragua played a big part in a lot of the reading we were done on it, and people of a different colour, of a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
And this sort of exposes really the narrow-mindedness of the right wing and that nationalist attitude.
Yeah.
That there's nobody else in struggle. You know, and that the hunger strike certainly internationalised the Irish struggle to a certain degree.
It absolutely did, because when the hunger strikes ended, then one of the first meetings we had afterwards was Republicans were saying, look, no, we don't want us all to go back to your homes. We want to keep this energy that you brought to the Hitchblock campaign. We want to keep us on board, and so they got different people in District 2's trade unionists and feminists and stuff like that, and
at this stage, Tim, so you were an activist within the Republican movement in West Belfast, obviously.
Well, I would have been in, like, I guess it was Sinn Féin Youth, stuff like that. I was on the anti-hate block youth group at the time, and then Beachmont Republican Youth, and then when the hunger strike ended, then we were just co-opted into Sinn Féin or Sinn Féin Youth and things like that. And I very much wanted to join Sinn Féin and up the activity. So in '82, I remember being at meetings and we were told to, I'm looking at your holding a Palestinian flag, a painting. So we were told, our struggle is international and we are part of a network of liberation struggles around the world. Africa, the ANC, Palestine, Nicaragua as well at the time. And I thought this was fantastic. So we went out and started painting murals, and the murals in the mid-falls area, 81, 82, certainly 82, when it started to become less about the hunger strikes and Bobby's hands and more about these international struggles. And you can see, see on Google and whatever, the murals, you can see the different ones that we painted, and we even declared a Beachmont an apartheid-free zone and stuff like that, and I was a Republican, well-known Republican, Terry Enright Senior, took me under his wing, and he was a Marxist and stuff, and so I started reading Connolly and some of the Black Panther guys and some of their books and whatever, George Jackson, and so I always felt that Republicanism identified with these radical movements around the world and stuff, and I think, with going back to Wolf Tone, there's always been an international dimension to Republicanism that I've always been proud of, and the solidarity with other groups and leading activists for others, Nelson Mandela and things like that,
The whole history of that obviously some people are blinded to. This modern day Irish Republicanism is Wolf Tone, the 1798, and Presbyterianism as well. But what are we going to say? The French Revolution, equality, fraternity, liberty, and all that goes with that. So, was Terry Enright shot dead then by loyalists?
No, that was his son.
His son.
But no, Terry Senior was. It was a big name.
I remember.
Carried a lot of weight at the time, and was very to the left of. I don't think there were many that I met were more left-wing than him instead of
So that had a major influence on yourself and the growth of the politics.
Absolutely.
I remember as an individual, you coming into the prison itself and being welcomed and all by Republicans, and you're just another person, another part of the struggle.
I remember you were on the wing through, even when I got up to the hate blocks, and then eventually, just in terms of being accepted as one of the boys, then I suppose being made the OC of H6 or whatever it was, and it was a wee bit of an honour, and I felt proud as hell, to be honest. And do you remember there was a wee tradition where on the day you're told, okay, Frankie's standing down and Tim is now the OC, and it was you, Frankie, started hammering the tables, and then everyone was speech and all, and I said, well, and I stood up and said, I'm very honoured here, and it's a great privilege to be able to tell 22 black men, or 22 white men even, get down to your cells and lock up. Everyone started hammering the tables and all, and I got messages from other blocks, I heard about your speech, so people thought it was great, and I just a wee bit of humour to
on that bit of humour and on that bit of joyfulness, of course, but on the other hand, on the other side of it, Tim, when I remember you entering from the jail and the abuse from loyalists, it's something that I've never witnessed in my life. It was outrageous, completely uncultured, uncouth. The mouthfuls that they were coming out with was outrageous, and we all fell silent for a while, and then just said, well, here, hold on a minute, he's one of ours. So then everybody rallied in and stand up for Tim, and ensure that Tim was treated as one of our own, which he is and was. So in itself, we came through those hard times of the criminal jail, and Tim was involved in the struggle for segregation, involved in the beatings and people getting hammered, and again, Tim was
on the boards.
Tim would have got special treatment again from the screws and from loyalism. Well, the rest of us was you were seen as that, he would have got special treatment. So again, it wasn't that easy. But the point I'm making here is that Tim was totally embraced by the wider Republican movement and the Republican people, both inside and outside.
Yeah.
And it shows the narrow-mindedness of some of those people today who call themselves patriots. Tim Branigan stood up. Tim Branigan took the fight to the British occupation. Tim Branigan wasn't afraid to confront imperialism and the occupation of this country.
Yeah.
And some fake patriots today carry the Irish tricolour and burn out people of colour in this country of Ireland. This is absolutely disgraceful.
Yeah, I struggle looking at them, at what they're doing with the tricolour and the stamp of waving it, and then there's Union Jacks beside them, and they're coming out with this racist crap and all of that, and some sort of pure Irish nationalism, ethno-nationalism thing going on, and yeah, you can, unless you look like Paddy Pierce or James Connolly or something, or Bobby Sands, then you're not one of us.
We were three complete internationalists, complete international struggle people who understood completely the struggle was international. So
yeah, and that's it. And with the fight today, north and south, a lot of that has just been jettisoned and or forgotten about. Like they never knew. They just haven't done enough reading, and there's no depth of knowledge to them. It's just this surface of you're black or you're from Poland or whatever, so you're not one of us, and we burn you out. And so I do think they hijacked the flag, and yeah, it does look a lot of times when you see 200 or 300 tricolours outside the GPO all fluttering away, and then you realise, oh no, that's not republicanism.
So is this based on from my own experience as a Catholic? I'm not be a complete atheist now, but seen as a Catholic living in South Belfast.
Mm.
So we were burned out of our home.
Right.
We had our windows smashed. We were shipped up the road in cattle trailers, and the colour of our skin was white. But let me tell you this: there's also racism and sectarianism, which are one and the same. Supremacy. That's what it's about. This is about domination. So this is unexcusable. Yeah. This is about dominating, and as they see, a lower individual. Political and cultural dominance. That's what it is.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's a challenge for us as Republicans, is to expose how they've hijacked and how they've derailed republicanism, or patriotism as they like to call it. And there's not a good Republican than wrapping yourself in the tricolour.
Absolutely. In fact, it's very, very dangerous just to do that. But
and there's a couple of Connolly posters around the walls here. The quote, but one of my quotes that I've been using recently from James Connolly is, it doesn't matter if you raise a green flag over Dublin if you're going to play the game, the financiers and the landlords and all of that, And
there's none of this by accident, none of it. If you take Drew Harris is in charge in the south of Ireland, and Drew Harris in the north of Ireland, his conduct was Drew Harris is the man that still, that up until he left here, held the documents back of people that the collusion was still involved in the cover-up. So we'd be MI6 and MI5. The backdrop to that nationalism and the rise of that right, particularly in the south of Ireland, we believe goes right back to the water protests. We had over 100,000 people marching in the streets together, opposing the government. They weren't going to allow that to happen again. So the two major reasons is one, to keep Sinn Féin out of power, and the other one, of course, to again divide and conquer. And the uneducated, the easy influence people have fallen into the trap of the McGregors, the rapists like McGregor, calling people patriots. On this complete raw sectarianism, racism, and nationalism, and we want no part of it.
Yeah, well, people like McGregor and the new right, as they are, I guess, and fascists, whatever you want to call them, then they have, and they always have, whether it's Mussolini or Hitler or whatever, they have a very seductive, short message. All your problems are because there's guys with brown skin down the street, or there's Asians or blacks live nearby, and to get rid of them will be in the promised land, and it's just a nonsense, and it's ahistorical, and it's never going to be true. But they align themselves. The thing about McGregor and stuff is they seem. When I point this out to people on the Falls Road, I say they're all using exactly whether Trump or Farage or McGregor, same messages. And they're identifying the same easy targets all the time. And when they're telling you that director energies there, their friends and financiers and property owners and stuff, they're making a killing.
Property and housing, the Ballymena is some of it. There is certainly difficulties. Of course, housing in the north of Ireland is worse now.
Yeah.
Well, independent councillor in Dungannon, Brian Monteith, will lay out the figures for anybody who wants to see that. But housing is now worse in the Tyrone area than it is and was in the start of the civil rights, which was about housing. Take Ballymena, for example. Okay, those people that they burned out, they didn't take anybody's house. That's rented accommodation.
Yeah.
But as that process, as they burn people out of rented accommodation, now the housing executive is obliged to house those people in houses because there's a point system and their points have risen. It's completely and utterly counterproductive. And they will now be given free housing somewhere, let's hope, and let's hope they're safe in it.
Yeah.
The attitude itself is so contradictory and so far back.
It's not to do with diversity or immigration, it's capitalism, and in the area that I grew up in, Beachmont, I'm sure you know, Frankie, all the terrace streets. But
60% of the kids in West Belfast are living in poverty.
Yeah. Poverty
has risen in West, since Sinn Féin have taken control of West Belfast. Child poverty and poverty in general has consistently risen. Yeah. People need to wake up here. These people have done nothing for their local communities. They talk about millions and millions for Casement Park. Look at the area it's in. Yeah. Look at the way people are living in that area.
If I open the blinds in the morning and I'm overlooking Casement Park, I'm well aware of it, I would raise poverty a lot as an issue, and I would challenge Sinn Féin and the elected representatives in the area. And West Belfast, maybe four or five MLAs, an MP, and God knows how many councillors. But when I meet them, and some of them I was in, you and I, like Shane Walsh, for example, we all three of us were inside together. But when I challenge any of the Sinn Féin reps on poverty, for example, they don't want to know. They don't want to talk about it. And we're coming up to the summer, so there'll be 2 months now of West Belfast is the greatest place in the world because of the fella. And Jerry Adams posing with different people from around the world and people going to events and all of that. And Fela, don't get me wrong, Fela is a great event, and they put on some great events and stuff like that. And it's great that there's discussion, and it's great that there are good concerts and kneecap concerts for the kids. All of that is absolutely brilliant. But it puts a stick and plaster over, or provides a bit of a smokescreen for what the truth of West Belfast is, that child poverty, deprivation, my God, suicide rates, and coming up to the fact that all I ever see are people quoting Bobby Sands, "Our revenge will be the laughter of our children." I've had enough of that. Sorry, I love due respect to Bobby Sands and his writing, that was just a line of inspiration. It's not policy. You can't base a political programme around it.
Well, the point about it is, Tim, I agree with what you're saying. The laughter of our children because they're starving, the laughter of our children because they're hungry bellies going to bed at night, the laughter of our children when they've no shoes on their feet to go to school. They're cherishing all of the children equally is the one that should be quoted from the 1916 proclamation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see from the services, the education in the area and the state of the schools and things like that. Not to run down the schools in West Belfast, but some of them struggle. We have issues around results for kids at 16 and 18 and stuff like that. Educational attainment, as I say. The kids that, well, here's a great example. Let's go back maybe 15 years, but Sinn Féin, and this was a good idea, don't get me wrong, Sinn Féin asked the kids in the area, the kids were being antisocial and stuff like that, but they were good kids, they just had too much energy in this little calm space. But anyway, they were canvassed and they were asked, what would you like to see? That we were to paint a mural, what mural would you want? And I've made this point before, but so 15, 20 years ago this was, right? And the kids could have chosen David Beckham or a Celtic player or whoever, right? Some pop star or something. and this mural would have been painted for them. And what they did ask for was suicide awareness mural. And so there was photograph or painting of a syringe and drugs and all of that. And I thought, my kids are 12 and 13 years of age, and this is the future they envisage for themselves. But even during the hunger strikes, Frankie, when I was 14, 15, suicide couldn't get in your head. It just wasn't on the radar at all as an option in your life, you know.
But you down to Divis, Ballysena in Divis and walking around Divis and then around the Lower Falls and places like that in Ballymena, brilliant people, fantastic working class people, trying to make the best. And they don't actually want to be, and they're not anti-Republican, but they find it very, very hard to challenge those MPs, councillors, and people like that who are seen as Republicans, and that's been abused.
Yeah.
You know, and even, I have to be honest now, even counting those people as Republicans, let's analyse that. You can't be a Republican and accept the monarchy.
Yeah.
Even a French person can't be a Republican. Yeah. Jeremy Corbyn was asked to go and meet the King. Jeremy Corbyn said, why would I do that when I'm a Republican? Yeah, no, Sinn Féin, on Bobby Sands' anniversary, sat down to a massive meal with the King in Westminster.
It's insane.
Then the King of Westminster met the three outreaches of what he calls the UK, Wales, Scotland, and the North, to solidify the union. And when the Labour Party took over, the statement they made was quite clear here. We are not neutral. We are unionists.
Yeah.
So the border poll will not come into play. Doesn't exist as far as they're concerned.
Yeah.
And just in case people don't know the border poll that Sinn Féin signed up to, the triple lock system, it can't be called. One, unless the Secretary of State, he or she decides. Two, the wording of that poll, which the English are masters of duplicity within their own language, a comma or a full stop, whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. The question certainly won't be, do you want to live in a 32-county closest republic?
No.
They also, then, they will tell us who's allowed to vote and who's not allowed to vote. Mm-hmm. Now, what's that policy about? Mm-hmm. The British play cricket. One game lasts 3 weeks. The Irish play hurling. 40 minutes of mayhem with sticks. So their strategy being, how many people is going to be in this country that's eligible to vote, that may not vote their way? Yeah. That's part of the reason they're going to decide who votes, in my opinion. And this new Ireland that Sinn Féin talks about in the shared island, people need to watch out for the Commonwealth. The question is going to be, and Sinn Féin are going to say, we United Ireland under the Commonwealth. Mm. This is the big question.
Yeah. No, I think that... one of the challenges Sinn Féin activists would make to me and have done in the last year, in a very challenging way, it must be said, is what are you doing for United Ireland right now? What are you doing? And my response to that's pretty simple. That you're talking about reunification after 800 years of British occupation. It's not going to come down to what Tim Branigan's doing, one way or the other now. And so what they do by posing that question is to try and put me on the back foot because I'm criticising them. And to come back to your initial point there about the Sinn Féin's relationship to the British monarchy, and I found very problematic, and I simply don't see how you can be a Republican. I very much align myself with Jeremy Corbyn and lots of other people who no time for the British monarchy, they're British themselves, and it's a no-brainer to me. But what I do find is that Sinn Féin, not only, it's not just tolerated, they absolutely embrace it now, and they go well over and beyond even any sort of, there might have been an argument for one token gesture, right? There might have been, but they're going a bit backwards and things like that, and Michelle O'Neill, like in the last 2-3 years, a couple of the senior royals, Prince Philip, and then the Queen died, and the tributes that are paid them, and I made this point at Easter, much to the annoyance of a lot of Sinn Féin members, but the tributes that Michelle O'Neill or Mary Lou will pay to the royals, with Prince Philip, Mary Lou said, what a life he led, what a life.
Yeah, chief of staff of the parachute regiment, absolutely. He killed people in Ireland for 200 years.
And I'm going, And I was saying, well, let's see what they say on Easter Sunday, you know. And what they had in effect was Michelle O'Neill involved in a drive-by commemoration. You know, they jump out of a people carrier, poster photographs, and disappear again. And we were inside, Frankie, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but remember the boys need to take music from the blocks.
Yeah.
And in one of those songs, one of the,
R.I.P.
one of those songs calls out the Free State parties. And the line, I can't remember the song, I can't remember the line, but it's something along the lines of send someone to Glasnevin quick, you know, to take the bad look off us, and a token, you know, bring a read, a Caesar Sunday, let's remember the struggle, you know, and then we'll get back to the brown envelopes and property speculation. And to me, that's what Sinn Féin is at now. And I struggle and I've challenged well-known Republicans, I'm not naming them here, but I've challenged them saying, what you're accusing Fianna Fáil and Fianna Gael of doing, you're now doing avoiding commemorations, winding down the struggle, attending Hillsborough Garden parties, you know, all of that. And you know, if you live in County Wicklow or if you live in County Kerry and you're a bit of a West Brit and you admire the royal family, I think that's up to them, right? But to go through the struggle that we went through, and to, for example, Frankie, not to get into the whole politics of the old struggle, but we considered certain people to be legitimate targets. And when I say we, I mean right up to the very top of the leadership, and the legitimate targets were decided at the top, and then it was filtered down, right? So we went out and killed people because they were building cop shops around the corner or whatever, right? And or they were in some way helping the British state. And I just think, how do you move from that position to showing up at practice in Westminster? And I think, you know, to the families of the people we killed, and to the volunteers who got killed or lost their youth because they ended up getting 20 years in jail, I just think, you know, and because of all that commitment, all that loss, struggle, trauma, pain, that was inflicted, I think it is reprehensible of Sinn Féin leadership, especially the ones of our generation. And again, not to name it, but we all know who they are. What are you playing at? Or how do you? I don't know how to do it. And I struggle with it. But so all I do is make the case that James Connolly behind you on the wall there is made. You know that we need a socialist republic that addresses the needs of Irish people. And by Irish people, I mean people who live in Ireland, and not just people with ginger hair. You know?
Yeah, no, I get you 100%. It's reprehensible, certainly. But what we need to do is, in all fairness, and we've analysed Sinn Féin, we've got good analysis there, is we need to move on from that. Because Sinn Féin aren't the Republican movement.
No.
Sinn Féin do not own the Republican struggle. And a cabal of a rotten leadership does not depict what people were involved in, and I'm very proud, and I'm sure you're very proud to have been involved in that struggle for independence, socialism, and a 32-county socialist republic.
Absolutely.
So what we need to do is build the Republican movement to challenge this struggle in a different, more effective way.
We need to be making the arguments now, and that includes challenging the Sinn Féin line, because what Michelle O'Neill claims to be a Republican statement, you know, I wouldn't see as Republican. Michelle O'Neill to me is a constitutional nationalist, you know, and somebody got a Belfast councillor had a go at me on Easter weekend there, and he said, you need to step away from the keyboard in case you embarrass yourself, right? Because that called Michelle O'Neill the West Brit. Now to me, I'm not naive. I know that West Brit isn't a phrase anyone wants to hear, but to me, calling Michelle O'Neill a West Brit, that's so far down the scale of what I could call her. Because me describing somebody as a West Brit, that's just my description of their attitude. But much more than that, she is a British minister, administering British law in a British parliament. And that is a much bigger crime than simply admiring the Queen, you know, that's only in Dublin 4 might do. And not, she just happens to be the figurehead. But in my lifetime, I could never imagine that Sinn Féin leaders would be driven around by the cops.
Well, we are.
Heavily armed cops, who I'm sure are vetted by the MI5. And I think, what are you playing at? In what way is that republicanism? And if you've ever read Orwell and Animal Farm and stuff, and the famous last sentence, the famous last paragraph, you're looking at the Republicans and you're looking at the Brits and you can't see the difference anymore. You know? And it's not even arguing because there's photographs of Michelle O'Neill I have on the phone there where she's writing a glowing letter to the Queen.
Yeah.
And then they stood at the City Hall of the Cenotaph and honoured I mean, it seemed to, at the time, I'm not a wee bit mad about it, but everyone else seemed to let it slide. But even go back to Mark McGuinness at Stormont, when Mitchell McLaughlin got up and read after going down to the sun, that Kipling poem or whatever, whoever wrote it, we shall remember them. And then they stood for the national anthem. And I have challenged Sinn Féin members time after time, said, how many times have you stood up and read out a speech honouring the Republic, honouring the Republican dead of the Stormont? No once. I argued with another ex-prisoner, Raymond McCartney, I argued with him about this in a meeting in Stormont once, and I was up representing the ex-prisoners. And, it's just, I've said to them, said the face and said, no, that seems to me that they're not ashamed of the struggle and they're ashamed of their past, and they seem to feel that the world starts with the Good Friday Agreement, and there's no history before that. And I'm not playing that game. I'm not at all. I'm well aware that there was a struggle, phenomenal amounts of time and effort and energy went into attacking the Brits, and from Tyrone right up to Andy Town, and people, 25,000 people went through the jails and hundreds of people got killed, and that's just us. And then there's what we did, and we didn't always get it right. Lots of innocent people have died, and it seems to me that the Republican leadership said, we don't want to talk about that anymore. Look at us standing with the Queen now. We're over meeting President Biden and all of this, and it's symbolism and, if I ever hear the phrase again, historic initiative by the leadership, they dressed everything up as, for the peace process, they dressed everything up as historic initiatives, and actually, it was surrender.
That's right, yeah, but again, you have a big call there, pedagogy of the oppressed.
Yeah.
By Pilot we are.
Yeah.
And it clearly outlines how the oppressed becomes the oppressor.
Yeah.
And this again is Orwellian theory, and this is exactly what you're saying. But I mean, I wouldn't dwell at Tim. Let's continue the conversation now. Let's see, possibly, and if you can, give us your view on the madness that we just witnessed on our TV screens in Ballymena.
Well, I was a bit alarmed by it, a bit shocked by it, and I suppose the first thing, I'm sure we all agree, first thing is that we should acknowledge that allegedly there was a very serious incident happened to a young girl, a girl under 16 who was sexually assaulted by two young boys, apparently, and that's being dealt with by the authorities, whatever. So that is what we're told was the initial reason for it. But to see what was a pogrom, basically people going door to door, to have been in that street and looking out the window and seeing them come towards your house, absolute terror, and for them to claim that it was all done because they want to protect our women and our children. Yet there's no petrol bombs in houses where women and children are living, carrying up upstairs and fighting for their lives. So full of contradictions, full of lies, basically. I don't believe for a second that they're motivated by any notion of protecting women and children. I think basically it's just bigotry and racism And I did get. Well, one of the things that annoyed me was watching, on BBC News or whatever, they interviewed some of the locals, and they were saying, oh, this was a great wee town, this is a great place, until a few years ago when these foreigners started arriving. But I remember 20 years ago, Ballymena, the exact same area in Hardyville, they were going mad protesting outside the Catholic Church during mass hours and stuff like that, and put people through hell for a year or two with their protests with lambed drums and all. So that area, and I'm sure not everyone in it, but that area has a hardcore of loyalists.
Yeah, the contrast was really, really surprised.
Who have always expressed bigotry, and we will all know from our we were younger, Ballymena, Ballymena, places like that. Very red, white and blue, and did you go in there? Like, I went up to Portrush on the bus one time, and my brother said, my brother and his girlfriend were bringing me, and they said, nah, when we get on this bus, your name's Sammy. And for the rest of the day, your name's Sammy. And that's the way it was,
Yeah, the contrast time of that scene was really, really shocking, and shouldn't be, of course, when we consider the ego of Robert Hamill and the young Quinns in Ballymena. And the cops, supposed to be protecting people, stood idly by and watched these thugs burn people out of their houses. Stood by and watched it. Yeah. And then all the talk about protecting the innocent, protecting the young, protecting women. But yet Chloe Mitchell was raped, killed, and much, much more happened to her. There was no protest then. Is anybody protesting outside Jeffrey Donaldson's house? No, I don't think so. So, and those are also allegations, I should say. But at the same time, you can see the contrast and the difference. Yeah. So the authorities stood by the like of Robert Hamill. They sat in jeeps, armed to the teeth, and watched loyalists kick Robert Hamill to death.
And then helped him to cover up.
Rang the loyalists the next day and told them to get rid of their clothes because we're coming to raid you. Yeah. That's the sectarianism deeply entrenched in this failed society.
And in Coleraine, you could see the footage they were dragging wheelie bins onto the railway tracks and stuff, and there's two cops standing there. Now, we're all aware of the contradictions in loyalism, and two, the unacceptable nature of the PSNI from RUC. So, on some levels, I wasn't surprised by it. I've always thought, I'm glad I grew up on the Falls and not the Shackle, just in terms of where people's heads are at. And not everyone on the Falls Road was a radical Marxist or a socialist or a feminist or whatever. Same in jail, but there were plenty of people with good, decent politics and a sense of decency, a sense of accommodating difference and stuff. So when I went into the H blocks in the Crumb, I don't think I was ever any more safer in my life, frankly, to be honest. Right. And I'd talk about one squad of men to have your back, you know what I mean? So we were all angry young men, or motivated young men, maybe not angry but motivated and committed young men, and so it wasn't always a picnic, we could wind each other up and tempers got heated and stuff, but sure, we had a policy of no fights and no gambling and stuff, so it was an incredible space, an incredible atmosphere and an incredible culture. And probably one of the big disappointments is when you get out of jail, you realise, okay, the rest of society isn't like that, and we were in a wee bubble at times.
I think that might be part of the problem of some of the so-called leadership's attitude to let's employ what we did in jail. The difference in jail is a homogeneous society, and when you come out, you can't apply that on the outside. But the contrast again of the so-called government champion saying we hold the police to account. We'll put manners on them. They didn't put manners on them in Ballymena and Ballymena, and the contrast, of course, being in Derry last night. Hundreds of policemen, full riot gear, with dogs, shields, batons last night. Great the youth who I don't agree with that, they shouldn't have been at it, but still, they treated it in a complete different fashion, as they always do. Two-tier policing system as well. This is now supported by Sinn Féin. Actively, they are calling and recruiting for this pro-British imperialist occupational force in the 6 counties. What is their job? They have a baton, they have CAF spray, and they have guns to protect the interests of the British state.
Yeah. No, I really wrong. It's just breaking apart trying to get sense of Sinn Féin on police, and they tell you what they want to hear, and they have very. When you're in our areas, when I'm in West Belfast, you could be walking along Falls Road, talk to your Republican, and say, "No, you're right, I'm fucking get the cops through," and all you know. But when push comes to shove, or when they're in the party structures, or if they're politicians or whatever, they say different things when they're on TV, and I guess I'm taking again, not to single anyone out. It's not about any one individual Sinn Féiner, but Jerry Kelly being on the policing board, and I criticised him one time for a statement he made or something, and for a tweet that he wrote, and one Republican pulled me and said, "Who are you to criticise Jerry Kelly? Who are you? Do you know what he did?" It doesn't matter what he did. What's what he's doing now? You can't live off that, and so that was what again. This sort of personalise it. How can you criticise Jerry Kelly? He was involved in more operations than you ever were. Yeah, they may well be, but what is he? You know what I mean? And no,
that's not the point. Of course, Michael Collins was a revolutionary one time. He ended up executing his own people. So we'll not go down that road of what you did. It is what you are doing now from a revolutionary perspective for left-wing socialist republicanism. And the establishment certainly isn't doing anything.
No, they shouldn't be in the establishment now, The landlords, my goodness.
Yeah, so let's have it from an international perspective, as we can see, and Irish Republicans in particular have a certain affinity, and of course we support the Palestinian struggle. And our hearts goes out to the Palestinian people. There's a genocide being carried out by Zionism and Europe and America as we speak. Similar genocide was carried out here in Ireland in 1847, 1750s as well, of starving people to death. This is exactly what we're witnessing. If people never ever understood imperialism or capitalism, now's the time to understand it. What you're viewing is imperialism. Rid of complete land, like the Native Americans, the Aboriginal, the Irish, rid of land completely of its native people, of its culture, of its language, to steal its resources. And that is what we're witnessing.
Absolutely.
And we're being distracted by the Iranian attacks, the attacks by Israel on the Iranian people, while 50 to 60 a day are dying in Gaza. Why should we not have an affinity with that? And of course we do, as left-wing socialist Republicans. Yet and all, the people that we just talked about, who are ex-Republicans, went to the White House to meet Joe Biden.
They certainly did.
When they were told not to.
And
they would have went the second time only they weren't invited. Bottom line.
And they had secret meetings with the Friends of Israel and stuff, It's just the hypocrisy of the Republican leadership. Not every single individual Sinn Féin member or a 22-year-old Sinn Féin member doesn't remember the conflict and all that. But the names and the senior Republicans, they know what, as I've said, you know what you've done, don't lie to me about it, But they seem to be enjoying their lifestyles, the 4x4s and the multiple properties. So.
Yeah, well that's it. And you take if we look at it from a wider perspective of arisen people, let's say, and an example of that was the water charges in Ballymena in our capital city in Dublin. Where the working class people certainly had risen. Now the rise and the infringement as we speak of the right wing element of nationalism in the 26 counties, and right across Ireland, 32 counties of Ireland. But this is nothing new, and it's always been there. The Ronald Duffy's, the socialist officers were born. Peter O'Donnell had to leave his native and go and live on an island, for example. So socialism has always been attacked. There's always been a right wing element Catholicism in Ireland,
Yeah.
and we see the rise of that again. But this is facilitated by the like of Drew Harris, who for years was in charge of the Six County oppressive RUC and PSNI.
Oh,
This is the same man who was MI5 chief. This is the same man who held all the documents back from the families who proved Sean Brown, for example, who's internationally being recognised in the GAA, recognised him. We now know there was an agents involved in it, protected by Drew Harris, which he's now applying in the south of Ireland. And the people leading these protests are drug dealers, some of them rapists, criminals, career criminals, who've been paid agents of the state to divide the working classes. Do not fall into this trap. This is not Republican.
yeah. No, absolutely. No, it's not. It's nationalism, narrow nationalism, and fascism, and no. I think Republicans need to make the arguments and make good and sophisticated arguments at times, and not just pander to And again, Sinn Féin might be guilty of this. What am I talking about? Sinn Féin were absolutely guilty of this last week when they had to come out and condemn the trouble. And the first guy who did it was Phil Wigan, Northampton. And I saw a statement on Twitter, and I said, "You haven't even mentioned racism there, and you've shown no. It was just some sort of line like, oh, the violence was unacceptable, blah blah blah," and but didn't address at all what they were claiming to fight for. And I said, "You haven't mentioned racism. You haven't shown any support or solidarity to beleaguered communities, nor have you said anything positive about." People from other countries being here, living and contributing and stuff like that, And so then we had to issue another statement later, and it was a couple of days before I started asking, where's Michelle O'Neill in all of this? Where's the First Minister? And is she going to go up to Ballymena? And they said she doesn't want to go up to Ballymena because it would inflame the situation. And I'm thinking, well, that's the RUC's line for not taking the flipping flags down during the 12th and all of that, just continually use that as a get out clause, And I had to get a message or tweeted about Mary Lou, who by the Thursday still hadn't even mentioned it, And I'm going, you're the leader of an All Ireland party. There's a racist pogrom going on in the north. Are you not going to speak on it, And then the next morning she gave an interview to RTE. But, warm words and token gestures. But you can see that if they can avoid doing it, they will not comment. They just keep their heads down and hopefully it all blows over, And whereas people need to be stating clearly, strong and positive terms, why this is wrong, and that there is an alternative, and make the arguments.
Of course, and that's identified. We're not hiding from the fact that there's difficulties and problems in society.
Absolutely.
Certainly nothing to do with immigrants. When you go to hospital, who treats you?
Yeah.
It's a defunding of the National Health Service that they want to privatise. This is capitalism in action. The schools, education, all of that stuff. Now, teachers are now paying for kids to go to school. Teachers buy their own pens. Teachers buy their own chalk. So that this is defunding and not financing the infrastructure in the name of capitalism. So people need to really focus on where the difficulty lies. The difficulty lies with the governments. It doesn't lie with working class people, the lowest common denominator. What they ask people to do is punch up, not down. Your problems is arising from Westminster and its capitalist attitude to people.
Yeah, no, I think for Irish people and people who are listening to this, like in big time, there has been a big turnover, and you can see a lot more brown, black people and Asian women and stuff with the headscarves and all on than you would have 5-10 years ago and stuff. But when they pay their rent, people should ask who they pay their rent to. And that tells a story.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not going to other immigrants.
Northern properties.
Yeah. Well, it's going to landlords. It may not even be just one company. It's going to landlords, and often those landlords are politicians and so on. So.
Yeah, and we see the old argument. This old argument, we listened to this argument this last 60, 70, 800 years, for example, but more recently in this country, we listen to this argument, Demons. What did Demons get? We got nothing that you didn't get. Secondly, working class people in the Shankill Road, Ballyfill and Rathcoole are just in as bad a situation as we are. We need to stand together on this to demand a 32 county socialist republic. All working class people are equal and irrespective of colour, race or gender. It's together, shoulder to shoulder. We need to challenge the system. The last time we done this in the 30s was a march for bread down the Shankill Road with Protestant Catholic in the centre. The establishment wrecked it. They wrecked it to ensure it would never happen again. So people will listen to this. What we need to say is wise up, educate yourself, and realise where you have to punch. You punch at the enemy, and the enemy is capitalism, money grabbing, greedy capitalists who want to destroy every working class element of struggle.
Yeah. Couldn't really hear more. And
well, Tim,
James Connolly there would be proud of that last statement. So.
It was indeed, and Tim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sitting here across from Tim, my comrade, who I would stand behind anywhere, irrespective of the colour of his skin. I respect this man as much as I respect any of the other volunteers I ever stood with or lay with in prison cells. Tim, go to meet him, I owe a horror. Chucky Arla.
Chucky Arla, thanks for the invite.